大家好，我们将进入圆桌讨论的环节。除了刚才演讲的 David Kruger 和杨耀东老师，很高兴我们有更多专家一起加入圆桌的讨论，包括 UI/UC 助理教授李博老师、智源创新应用实验室负责人黄文浩博士和智源研究院研究员傅杰博士。有请。Hi everyone. Given that David is here, I will ask the questions in English and you can choose to answer in English or Chinese. We only have about 30 minutes for 5 people until the closing keynote by Professor Jeffrey Hinton. So let's discuss 3 questions and let's try to keep our responses brief. Let me start with an open-ended question and maybe we can start with Professor Li Bo. So what are some of the most important but neglected questions for AI safety and alignment, especially but not limited to large language models?
Yeah, that's a great question and a very hard question. So basically, from AI alignment perspective, I think there are several things important in terms of alignment, in terms of having domain knowledge and giving, like explicitly giving large language models and other any machine learning models like reasoning capabilities. And also, I think one thing our group and working on, we think very important is giving such alignment certification about robustness, privacy, generalization. Like therefore, not only empirical, but also you have a guarantee certain types of lower bound, which is very important for some safety critical scenarios. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would have said interpretability a couple years ago, but now the safety community, at least a large chunk of it, has gotten really into that topic, so I don't think it qualifies as neglected anymore, although it's certainly worth knowing about if it's not on your radar yet. I think like things more like science and theory, so really understanding how things work, especially like understanding the learning process, so sort of plugging the stuff that I talked about in my talk a little bit. And from a theory point of view, I think theory is very challenging in machine learning. It doesn't always, it rarely actually tells us things, but it can help build intuition. I do think we should be thinking about like having standards and what the standards should be, because there's been a lot of discussion about regulation and auditing and evaluation, but I don't think we have a clear sense yet of like how we can say if the system is safe, and that relates to this issue of trustworthiness that I was talking about. So I think very broadly the trustworthy side is the most neglected in my mind.
So a bit similar in terms of auditing and evaluations.
Yeah, I think something important to me is the data and algorithm. As for data, so we mentioned that in the we want to add the alignment and the safety control in pre-training stage and also in SFT stage. So actually, we seem don't have a very good data set for both pre-training and SFT, and also we need to do a lot of data quality control and data cleaning work there to make it more safe. And for the algorithm part, and as Lacan mentioned in yesterday's talk, probably transformer is not the best architecture for when we pursuing AGI. So we need some breakthroughs in the algorithms and also in the alignment algorithm. Yeah.
So right now, I'm focusing on the data set part. So in fact, I released a data set called Would You Rather like 3 years ago. So we were trying to align the language model and some social preference across different regions. So for example, because we have data from different countries, our hypothesis is that if the language model can have similar options as humans, maybe it's a social level Turing test. So we hope, like 3 years ago, we hope this data set or the benchmark can set a baseline for testing the language model to follow the social preference and the values as humans have.
Okay, so first of all, I would like to say I agree with all people, what they have said. So my viewpoint is that I think safe is not a new problem to our human beings. Look at the airplanes, they've been flying in the sky for decades, and the autonomous driving, they're nearly there to safely drive on the road. I think we as human beings have answers for safety, particularly from control perspective. I think maybe one thing we need to think about is how we really define safety in the large language model side. It's definitely not a binary problem, because for different people with different ages or different contexts or different background, there should be a different answer according to different safety level. For example, if children ask you how to create a bomb, you should not say, okay, I'm an AI, I'm not allowed to say anything about a bomb. You should tell him, right? But when an adult asks you how to create a bomb, maybe you would like to hide some key information from him. So I think safety, first of all, is not a new idea to human beings. Secondly, we need to have a hierarchy for different people. And from our algorithmic perspective, I think people in control domain, they have a lot of safety algorithms for those airplanes, so for those autonomous driving. I think that is where we can borrow a lot of knowledge from, yeah, as reinforcement learning and control research.
So one common theme is about criteria and evaluations for AI alignment and safety. Right now, we have many approaches of AI alignment, and we also recognize that there would be differences in terms of culture and politics in different regions. How can we make more progress in terms of having an agreed set of criteria for AI safety and control? David?
I guess, thinking beyond language models and into the future, I do think when we're talking about keeping systems under control, this is actually something that it has very little to do with values. So it's really just something that we all, I think, can agree on, that we want the systems to stay under control and to not do things that lead to human extinction. So I would like to see, a lot of focus on just that problem, and I think that that's something that is easy to get agreement on. What's hard, though, is to understand what sort of behaviors are dangerous from that point of view and what sort of restrictions would be effective. Because when something is smarter than you, it can find clever ways to accomplish its goals. And you might think that you've, put the handcuffs on the system, so to speak, but it might pick the lock.
Would others like to react to that point?
So I think one thing to do is to add to calibrate the language model. So for example, we can add the uncertainty into the language model. So when they give an answer, so we can say, can you be sure about the answer? So I think we are about to release a model to add a so-called verbalized confidence. Like say, you give the answer, and then I will ask whether you are 100% sure or just 80% sure. So it's a verbalized confidence out of the prediction from language model. So just one layer of the safety into the model. So maybe just one step ahead.
It's a bit similar to the idea from Professor Stuart Russell in his presentation.
Yeah, like the known unknown, unknown unknown. So we have to have this uncertainty calibration, like embed this into the language model.
So if I can just respond to that briefly, I think this is absolutely like a good thing to work on. I do think it's a very hard problem in and of itself. So hopefully, I think we can get some use out of it, but I think so far systems you can always find places where they're wrong and where they're confident and wrong. So yeah, I just want to highlight, I think it's like, when I think about Stuart's idea in particular, I think it sounds great in principle, but I'm not sure it will work in practice, at least with the kind of deep learning systems we have and the kind of techniques we have for this reason.
Yeah, I agree. That may fail, but we should try to see whether they can give this uncertainty.
Several speakers today have highlighted an open problem of safety under the setting of multi-agents, maybe multi-agent RL.
Do people want to say a bit on this problem and whether you agree that this is an important research direction?
Yeah, I would say yes. So we work on a lot of multi-agent in terms of not only safety, robustness, privacy, but also like fairness in terms of how you define fairness, not only like equal contribution or equal accuracy, but also in the traditional social choice or social theory, there are a lot of like alignment or other types of like envy-free types of definitions. So how to combine or incorporate the previous social choice theory to the machine learning and to the like more advanced AI or even AGI, I think that's a very important problem. And also, I think it's very dependent on the application, like if it's autonomous driving, air flight, these types of safety, and to the level of large language models like we use in daily life, this level are very different, and how we can like define them based on the functionality and the requirement. That's also something very important. And yeah, I think it's a hard question, but I think there are some traditional approaches and some new principles we should follow rather than do too much like a difference for different applications or functionalities.
Yeah, there's a difference between the scale of individual user and societal scale.
Yeah.
I guess Professor Yang has some experience doing this.
Yeah, as a
research.
multi-agent people, I would definitely agree that the mass community can offer a lot of knowledge to alignment research. Because from multi-agent research, multi-agent system research, things like game theory, solution concept, mechanism design, I think these tools can be definitely useful for alignment issues. For example, recently I see many papers talk about these self-align techniques. We have self-play in multi-agent system. Self-align, I think, is another side of the coin. So when you introduce multiple ChatGPTs in a system, then the natural question you can ask is, what kind of equilibrium will they reach? What does that equilibrium mean something beneficial to human beings, or what they agree on is actually still evil? Is ChatGPT rational from economics perspective? And if not, how can we create a mechanism to let them chat and output some useful and reasonable result for you to do better RLHF? Yeah, I think these level of questions can be shed light on by multi-agent research people. And I think, in fact, that the research community is already reflecting on this, and they're doing research on this topic, including red teaming, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, and I strongly agree with the idea for the multi-agent alignment. And as Yaodong mentions the paper for the multi-agent alignment, we put several language models into a sandbox and then let them to do the alignment things. And in my point of view, I think this is part of the future what will look like. You will have a lot of language models as agents to work with you, but I think in the sandbox, probably you can introduce some humans together. So this is a human and a language model, or human and machine, and combined together, society sandbox. Then the alignment will be more effective and more can be aligned to human and more efficiently here.
Yeah, I'd like to just share a few like high-level thoughts on this. So one relates to this question that you asked earlier about values. So I think I emphasized that we have a lot of shared values around maintaining control, avoiding extinction, but there will be some values conflicts between different developers of AI. And in game theory, you can have challenges even when there's benefits to cooperation, deciding who gets what share of those benefits. So there's this type of game called a bargaining game where, an ultimatum game is maybe what I'm thinking of as an example of that, where essentially I get to offer you a split of $100 and you accept or reject it. If you reject it, neither of us gets any money. And if you accept it, then we get money according to that split. And then, in this particular instance, I can offer you a penny, and it's rational for you to accept it. And if we were like simultaneously trying to decide, and we have to both propose an acceptable split, then you have sort of this dynamic where you might end up failing to get any money because you can't decide on what's a fair split. And I think that's one challenge that's important to address. one other thing that I think about here is actually AI systems cooperating too well. So I think a lot of the ideas that people have for making AI systems safe is to sort of pit them against each other. So you have like a system that's checking this other system and trying to make sure that it's not doing something bad and telling you if it is. And then the system that's being checked now has an incentive to behave well because it knows that it's being watched. But if those two systems end up cooperating, then the system that's supposed to be watching this one could just lie to you, and then they can both cooperate and work against you. So yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes you want cooperation and sometimes you don't between AI systems.
Sorry, I actually want to echo on the point that you've just raised in terms of cooperation. What we found in the real-world data labeling is that ChatGPT is nowadays prefers answers from ChatGPT more than answers from humans, and they will give a high-level preference over human answers. That already is kind of acting in the sense of cooperation. And then if you use that amount of data to do alignment, you will be aligned towards what ChatGPT wants you to align, right?
Dr. Huang mentioned earlier that in the future, we are likely going to see a world of many LLM agents doing tasks for us. And I think within a month of the release of GPT-4, we saw AutoGPT and Baby AGI, and the open source community seems to be really driving a lot of the developments over the past few months. How does that change your perspective on the problem of AI safety and control, and what are some of the benefits and risks of doing open source?
I'll just answer quickly first, which is, I think a lot of people have been thinking we have a few big developers making language models. If they make those models safe, it'll be okay. And I think that's not how things are shaping up. So I think we have to worry about many different developers, and we have to worry about not just language models, but all of the different tools and agents that can be built based on top of them.
Professor Lee?
I would want to say that I think open source is still the future. Like even though Llama, for example, is not open source at the beginning for commercial usage, but the weights are leaked, and now the open source community like Red Pajama and all the models are pretty much close to the closed model. And of course, there is a gap still, but I think it's very close. And the open source model will give a good help for people to understand it and to analyze it, and therefore do a good, meaningful way to theoretically understand it and potentially give certification and analysis. So I think these types of effort I do appreciate for the open source community. And I do echo the previous discussion about the different criteria of safety in terms of definition and things. For example, from not only game theoretical perspective, like equilibrium, but also like cost stability, proportionality, all those things will help a lot. But all those built upon, we do have a healthy open source community and everyone can contribute and understand the model better. So from this perspective, I think it's helpful and very promising for us to develop good safe AI with open source help.
Any other perspective?
Yeah, I'd like to add one point is that the open source can contribute a lot to the dataset part. So as I noticed that Anyuan just published a dataset for the failure of the alignment.
Failures.
Yeah. So the open source can actually contribute a lot to such kind of scenarios. Then we will have a better dataset for alignment. So this is good, very good for research. Yeah.
So I believe that open sourcing is beneficial in the long run. So for example, let's take a look at the security community. They have the white hat community, so you can report the bugs. So it's open sourced, and then you can fix the bug. And so I think, as you mentioned, so to some extent, the AutoGPT is a bit dangerous because so you just tell that your goal is, and then the AutoGPT will just finish to generate a sequence of actions, and there's no audition. And but if we can build some open source tools to regulate that, so for example, we can make the operation more transparent. Maybe that can help. For example, I just released the so-called ChatDB. So we have a memory to augment the transformer, but all the operation generated by the transformer, is human readable, so into a database. So it's discrete and symbolic. So I think that will help. So in summary, so I think open sourcing will help in the long run.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt the importance of open sourcing. And in fact, I think the recent advances of those large language models from the open source community has been amazing. But I would also be a little bit cautious about open source a model because given the safety issue we've been discussing today, we all know it's not directly safe if you train it from scratch and you're not doing correct alignment. So I would say maybe practices from OpenAI like releasing a system card along with the model or the source code you are releasing might be a better idea. At least you have some level of understanding that is built beforehand. You open source it to the public. Yeah.
So I'll echo what I guess Stuart or Hinton would also say, which is, would you open source a nuclear weapon? And of course, that's not the systems that we have today, but I do think, open source is not always the answer. And I think right now, for me personally, I think with advanced AI systems, I'm hoping that people will be very careful in thinking hard about what other people could do with that system before they release it to the public. And I guess I also think we can get a lot of the benefits, maybe not all of them, that we could get from open source by giving researchers access to the models and even giving like everyday people access to the models, but in a more controlled way.
So a lot of the speakers today have talked about the phenomenon of emergence in large foundation models. So bigger and more capable foundational models can develop beneficial capabilities, but also potentially harmful ones. How should the AI safety community think about this problem? How should we be trying to forecast, anticipate, or respond to these behaviors?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. Yeah, I think the emergent capability of large models, especially large language models, is very interesting. For instance, recently we did a large trustworthiness analysis for GPT-4 in comparison with GPT 3.5, which will on archive soon. And from the perspective of several, like including toxicity, adversarial robustness, OOD robustness, like ethics, fairness, privacy, etc. And we find that actually those like emergent capability, for instance, the in-context learning or things, actually have both sides, which means even if you have powerful in-context learning with like unseen tasks, it's very easy to do the so-called backdoor attack by just adding one or small word in one of the demonstrations, and then it will cause very severe problems in terms of the answer and for different tasks. So I would say in terms of this, we do need to leverage, good to leverage the emergent capabilities, but also realize the downside of it, and by doing analysis, by doing evaluation, and therefore eventually defend and protect against those bad side and leverage the good side.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot the question.
Yeah, I think ability, the word itself is a neutral word, so we cannot say it is harmful or useful. So just like you have a car, so it can help you speed up in transportation, but it also can crash somebody and kill somebody. So I think when we see a lot of emergent abilities in language models, so it's a good thing. So what we should worry is about how people use these emergent abilities to do something if it is harmful. So we have noticed that someone using GPT or ChatGPT doing some cheating, something, and caused some money losses. So this is something we should care about and do some surveillance on that.
All right,
I think,
Dr. Fu?
Yeah, thanks. So I think we should think about not just like emergent capabilities, but emergent behaviors more generally. So, there's one question of if the system has the capability, and then there's whether or not it chooses to use it and when it chooses to use it. So a lot of my work actually is relevant to this, I think, because we're studying learning and generalization. There's one paper that I didn't get to mention with a student, Ethan Caballero, on scaling laws. So that's one way that we can try and understand emergent capabilities. Of course, usually people are modeling like the loss instead of the loss on different subsets. But if you combine this with the ideas that I was talking about, of looking at the learning curves on different subsets as well, then I think we want to understand how to project those learning curves into the future and see how the behavior is going to change over time on these different subsets of the data. And the other thing in terms of emergent behaviors is I'm especially concerned about like emergent agency, like systems becoming more agentic over time at some point. So language models maybe aren't designed to be agents, but they might become more agentic. And I think that's something that is really interesting and we should watch for.
So I think one possibility would be design a new metric system. So because maybe from one angle, so we see the so-called emergent capability, but maybe through another angle or another like metric system, we see a continuous behavior curve. So there's no emergent capability at all. So we can predict from a small scale, and then we can gradually scale that up. So maybe there is no so-called emergent capability. Just we see that through a wrong angle. Maybe from another angle, we see the continuous behavior.
I think we shouldn't be panicked about this emergence of intelligence or emergence of being unsafe more. Because we as human beings, we face these questions actually almost daily, right? Think about the financial market. You will never predict what the stock price is tomorrow, but that won't stop you from buying a financial product from bank, right? How we solve this is we define some risk measure under probabilistic sense, for example, VAR or CVAR. And I think if we can define a correct safety measure under that circumstance, then regardless of emergence or not, then we can roughly have an idea what would be going on, and then we can develop further regulation protocols or conduct based on these measures. And I think dealing with these level of emergence or stochasticity, we have many tools, in fact. Yeah, but just we need to agree on one and then keep developing. Yeah.
So this is the last question. Maybe everyone could say a few words about it. For those who are interested in getting into this field of AI safety, control, and alignment, what advice will you give to potential PhD students, or for those who are actually working on large models who are concerned about this problem? Are there things that you wish them to take more seriously? What would you like to highlight as a takeaway?
Okay, yeah, I can quick start in the sense that I think for all my students, the trajectory in this area is starting from, say, evaluation, or in other words, attacks, like attacks all the models, and then we find, okay, everything is possible, and then go to defend in terms of empirical and the theoretical to providing the lower bound for certain accuracy or reward or different for different algorithms. And in this way, you can have a clear trajectory from end to end rather than only point on one point. I think that's get a higher level picture, I would say, is one suggestion I would say.
I think my advice would be think ahead, think about where the field might be in 5 or 10 years, think about what are the problems that other people aren't working on, and develop your own perspective on the problems and what to do about them. That's my advice.
Yeah, I think safety. So it is a big problem, also a small problem. If you think it's a big problem, so it will has a lot of relationship with the future of the humanity. So just like in Max's talk, he said, Sam told us the GPT probably may light out all the people. If it is big as such kind of problem, everyone who is interested in the future of humanity, who can do the safety research. And if it is small problem, so I agree with Professor Lee, we can do some evaluation and attack at first.
Yeah, I would just say watch Spider-Man and remember the more power you have, the more responsibility you have.
Yeah, I would do agree with what all previous 4 speakers have just mentioned. Yeah. do something that is not the current trend and think maybe multiple steps in ahead and then do planning.
It seems like we're facing a difficult challenge, but let's hope that more brilliant minds and researchers could enter into this field and help us tackle them. Thank you for such a wonderful discussion.
Thank you.